We are live with Adusa and St. Pauli girl, correct?
Yeah.
All right. Yeah, that was especially that wooden dude that they pulled out of that swamp, and those masks that are like 9,000 years old.
It's like I never heard about that. And what?
Yeah, I just did a show on them a couple of weeks ago. It's in my uploads. In fact, I can show a recent show. I don't have a problem with that. I was sitting here wondering.
Well, I'm really into planet formation at the moment, Greg.
Planet formation.
I've been looking quite a.
How about?
I've been looking a lot of Gareth Sapp.
Oh, really? Well, I got something, as a matter of fact, on planet formation from Mr. Thornhill, I think. I read it from his website.
Oh, that'd be brilliant.
Yeah. I'll put it right on. Let's see. Where did the Earth come from? It is known that there are more brown dwarf stars than bright stars. Some astronomers have recently realized that a planet orbiting such a star closely would be the place to look for life. But brown dwarfs, like all stars, are an electrical discharge phenomenon. Their visible diameter, like that of the enormous cometary comas, is an electric discharge phenomenon and much larger than the star's solid surface. So the fundamental mass-luminosity relation used to derive the mass, age, and size of a star from the character of its light is inapplicable. The electrical nature of stars removes the foundation of stellar astrophysics. However, a binary pair of brown dwarfs has been discovered,
No, don't have any sound yet, Greg, on
determination
here.
of their masses and diameters by another method. The result was that
Not on the
dwarfs
program.
are remarkably large for their mass.
Unless I've got it shut off, I
The
don't
same
think.
diameter as the Sun. That's about the same size as the coma of the comet.
Oh, yes.
Their masses were said to be 35 to 55 times Jupiter's mass. The Sun is about 1,000 times the mass of Jupiter, although mass is not a measure of the amount of matter in a body, another major spanner in the works for stellar astrophysics. Brown dwarfs of that size are considered to be too small to initiate thermonuclear fusion, but that just isn't so in the electric universe, where all bodies receive electrical energy from the galactic circuit. For example, consider Jupiter as an independent body moving in the galaxy inside its radiant plasma sheath. Analogous to a cometary tail, it would be regarded as a brown dwarf star. And even if the glowing sphere were half the size of Jupiter's present magnetosphere, which is about 10,300,000 kilometers in diameter, all of Jupiter's large moons would orbit comfortably inside that cocoon. I have noted the significance of this earlier. Since an electric star is heated externally, a planet need not be destroyed by orbiting beneath its anode glow. In fact, life is not only possible inside the glow of a small brown dwarf, it seems far more likely than on a planet orbiting outside a star. This is because the radiant energy arriving on a planet orbiting inside the glowing sphere is evenly distributed over the entire surface of the planet. There are no seasons, no tropics, and no ice caps. A planet does not have to rotate. Its axis can point in any direction, and its orbit can be eccentric. Such an arrangement is far more benign toward life than at present, where the energy source, the sun, subtends a small angle in the sky, and the habitable zone, in parentheses, of orbits is very narrow. In our neighborhood, there may be many more brown dwarfs than sun-like stars. They are difficult to detect since they glow mostly in infrared. A spectral class of L dwarfs, about 1/10 the mass of the Sun, has been found with an effective temperature of only 700 K to 950 K. About the same as the surface of Venus at 740 K. This is way below the theoretical limit of 1750 K for a nuclear-powered dwarf star, while it is not a problem for the electric star model. The light from the L dwarfs is unaccountably bluer than expected and even exhibits X-rays. Only the electric model has a simple explanation for this conundrum. The higher energy radiation is emitted from the brown dwarf's electrical corona. Therefore, the light bathing a satellite will be strongest at the blue and red ends of the spectrum. Skylight on any satellites would probably be a pale purple. See later the classical purple dawn of creation. Photosynthesis relies on red light, so plant life could flourish, especially when the atmospheres of the L dwarfs contain predominantly water molecules. Satellites would accumulate atmosphere, and water would mist down. Brown dwarfs are noted for their occasional inexplicable polar jets and flaring, as explained in my Electric Stars article. Stars that do not have bright, tufted photospheres do not have the power feedback control that maintains the steady radiant output of the sun, while the power input varies as measured by X-rays and sunspot latitudinal migration. So any power surge on a brown dwarf will be met with polar jets and flaring behavior. We know from coronal mass ejections, CMEs, on the sun that this involves hurling matter into space. Flaring would cause havoc on the satellites of a brown dwarf. In the extreme, it would give birth to a new satellite, but existing satellites would suffer deposition of solids, liquids, gases, and electrical discharge machining on their surfaces. This is a scenario never considered by geologists, but which explains all of the enigmas of planetary geology. Okay, let's assume that brown dwarfs and their satellites are the most hospitable places in the universe to establish life. That implies that the Earth was originally a satellite of a brown dwarf. That would explain many things. For example, where we got our water and oxygen atmosphere, why the high latitudes were so warm in the past that we find coal in Antarctica, how the Earth's gravity and atmosphere in the past could have been so different that it supported megafauna and megaflora, what caused the global mass extinctions with instant burial and fossilization, and so on. But hang on, you say, what about the fact that gravitational capture is highly unlikely? That's true, but this is an electric universe. Each star being an electrical body in a galactic discharge, will have a plasma sheath that limits the weak electric field between the star and the sheath. It is the sun's heliosphere. The plasma sheath is a double layer, where almost the entire voltage drop between the star and the galaxy will be found. The heliosphere is about 200 AU across. That's a big target. You could fit about 1,300 such targets between the nearest star and us. The size of this electrical target is important because it is the minimum distance at which the electrical insulation between two stars breaks down. I say minimum because the polar circuit of each star extends much, much further. As we see where the circuit has been lit up in a planetary nebula. This beautiful example of a binary nebula shows the classic features of a plasma Z-pinch. The current density in the Birkeland current filaments is sufficient to cause the plasma to enter glow mode. The polar circuit is composed of concentric cylinders of parallel Birkeland current filaments. The polar double layers are regions of high electric field and radio noise. The cylinders pinch down at the star in the characteristic hourglass shape. So what I'm suggesting is quite radical. That all of the planets and moons in the solar system did not originate with the sun. They were captured. The capture of a brown dwarf star begins when the plasma sheaths touch and they see each other electrically for the first time. The brown dwarf changes from being an anode into a galactic discharge to a cathode in the sun's environment. The adjustment is drastic. The brown dwarf is no longer a star. It becomes the mother of all comets that adjust and subject to a steady electrical acceleration toward the sun. That acceleration will tend to cause the satellites of the brown dwarf to be dislodged from their orbits and in a dynamic equilibrium strung out behind their primary cometary weight. Since a comet's ion tail is a discharge current, the satellites will experience mega auroras, devastating interplanetary discharges to varying degrees. As a cathode in the sun's discharge, the brown dwarf will jet matter into space like a comet and lose electrons. This has the effect of reducing gravity and apparent mass of the late star, which in turn modifies its orbit. Conservation of orbital energy requires that the cometary body moves in toward the sun. In other words, it is captured. We see so-called non-gravitational acceleration to a small extent in modern comets. This lowering of the gravitational field of comets has given rise to the mistaken view that they are fluff balls. However, they look like solid rock, and they are solid rock. The effect on a captured brown dwarf is to turn it into a low-density gas giant. As the captured brown dwarf traverses the plane of the ecliptic, it encounters the current sheet of the solar wind that may cause severe flaring and mass loss in the form of a new cometary material. Even today, crossing the ecliptic plane is where comets, as the captured brown dwarf traverses the plane of the ecliptic, it encounters a current sheet of the solar wind that may cause severe flaring and mass loss in the form of new cometary material. Even today, crossing the ecliptic plane is where comets are most likely to fragment. The enhanced electromagnetic forces encountered in the plane of the ecliptic may cause damped oscillations in and out of the plane until capture is complete. The presence of the newcomer is felt electrically by those planets that encounter its coma or cometary tail. Charge transfer occurs via the filamentary currents in the tail, which serves to space the orbits of both bodies until charge transfer is minimized. Circularization of orbits also occurs due to the charge exchange with the solar wind until the voltage excursions in the sun's weak radial electric field are minimized. Trying to devise an evolutionary model of the solar system from a simple beginning is not going to work. The expert was almost right. We need a separate story for each of the gas giants, and we need to identify their scattered family members. The simplest approach is to match axial tilts because phase lock with the primary is normal for a satellite. And a spinning planet or moon behaves as a gyroscope and largely maintains its axial direction in inertial space, even when disturbed. A disturbance manifests as precession of the spin axis. For example, based upon the independent evidence, Saturn, Earth, and Mars were of one family. Their axial tilts are 26.44, 23.27, and 23.59 degrees, respectively. Saturn still has its ephemeral water ice ejecta rings, and its calculated density is the lowest, less than water, a result of its recent severe discharge activity. A final word about meteorites, comets, and asteroids. They have nothing to do with the sun. They are born at intervals from captured bodies, and their cometary phase and during close electrical encounters between planets and moons, in the process of capture or orbit stabilization. In 1988, I wrote that chondritic meteorites show all of the features to be expected of material that has been subjected to flash heating, acceleration, collision, and ion implementation.
Spatially restricted and compressed plasma stream, followed by sudden cooling, isotopic modification by
neutron bombardment, and intense radiation are simply explained as the effects of a Z-pinch plasma discharge. I predict that the features of chondrule shells could be reproduced in the lab in a plasma oven. That remains to be tested. Planets do not collide. Electrical forces and modification of orbits by charge exchange dominate in a close encounter. Mars bears fresh electrical scars of its entry into the solar system. With the mighty gash of Valles Marineris and the giant raised lightning blisters on the Tharsis Bulge, an interplanetary discharge is the only way for the Martian meteorites to have been launched into space. It should be no surprise that this story of the formation of the solar system could not be constructed on a purely theoretical basis. It was wishful thinking that such a complex family could be explained with one simple story. We now have the technology in a select few laboratories to generate in miniature and record cosmic electrical discharges. It allows us to verify that prehistoric mankind cut into solid rock their view of the last spectacular and frightening chapter in the history of the solar system. The capture of Earth by the Sun, comparative mythologists pointed the way by showing that the bedrock themes of mythology are universal and relate to memories of capricious planetary gods, warring with thunderbolts in the heavens and wreaking destruction with them on Earth. It gives us an unusual depth of meaning to the memory of the purple dawn of creation. Prehistoric mankind witnessed the creation of a new order in the heavens, the assembly of planets we see today. The serendipitous breakthrough in understanding of petroglyphs and the motivation behind their production requires that this story be examined thoroughly in the light of discoveries from space. Wall Thornhill. I'd like to direct you, if you think that the standard model has the answers, I would like to direct you to C.J. Ransom's video for the Electric Universe, Thunderbolts, Close Encounter of the Star Kind, and Conehead Connection. In this video, he lays out just how right the standard model has been over the years. It's a very good video. It's very informative. I'd also like to draw your attention to this photograph right here. Now, this one here is the main one, but look at this one right here. Isn't that a very good interpretation of a 3D effect of something that appears to be looking down on the Earth? How would they know to draw that unless they were looking at it? It's just my opinion. I'd also like to give a shout to Clint Steele, a truth warrior and brother in the cause of truth. Say thank you for helping me out and making your video. Check his channel out, Clint Steele. But don't believe me. Don't believe anything I just said.
Now
check it out for yourself, and you will see who is right and who is wrong. Thank you. 38 years later, the thermonuclear crisis remains with us, while the unacknowledged astrophysical crisis shows up in the crazy theories we see regularly. Such is the moribund state of politicized and institutionalized science that we remain into a dead end. Such is the moribund state of politicized and institutionalized science that we remain heading into a dead end. Meanwhile, unnoticed by those who have most to gain from it, the largest professional organization on Earth, Institute of Electrical and Electronic Engineers, the IEEE, have a plasma cosmology division with a far superior model that is amenable to laboratory testing and verification. It is based heavily on L. Fain's insights and practical laboratory experience of plasma discharge phenomena. Astronomers see in this image thick and turbulent clouds of gas and dust that are being sculpted into pillars by radiation and winds from hot, massive stars. The language is misleading and inappropriate. The pillars are not turbulent. They have the characteristic tornadic column form of parallel Z-pinch plasma discharge filaments. Z-pinches are the most efficient scavengers of matter in space. Having an attractive force that falls linearly with distance from its axis, gravity falls off exponentially with the square of the distance. Gravity and turbulence give no explanation for the surprising tornadic forms. The notion of triggered collapse is merely hand-waving. The inset image shows the telltale polar jet aligned with the Z-pinch column. The glowing ionization front is not principally a photoionization or collisional effect, but the glow of a plasma double layer, energized by electric current. The nearby Herbig-Haro object, HH399, exhibits the typical thin polar corkscrew jet seen in more detail in Herbig-Haro 4950 on the screen. See that face? You see that face? It's crazy. The heated glowing plasma in these jets can extend for trillions of miles. They do not explosively dissipate in the vacuum of space because of the electromagnetic pinch effect of the electric current flowing along the jet. The spiral shape is that of Birkeland current filaments, which are universal power transmission lines. Birkeland current pairs have been shown by both experiment and supercomputer simulations to form an actual sump of plasma, segregated radially by Markland convection. Markland convection causes helium to form a diffuse outer layer, followed by a hydrogen layer, then oxygen and nitrogen in the middle layers, and iron, silicon, and magnesium in the inner layers. So electric stars should have a core of heavy elements and an upper atmosphere mostly of hydrogen. Birkeland currents align themselves with the ambient magnetic field direction. The hourglass Z-pinch shape has been confirmed in the magnetic field of a star-forming region. See Science Volume 313, 11th August 2006. And in laboratory Z-pinch experiments, the plasma tends to form a number of beads along the axis, CHH34, which scatter like buckshot once the discharge subsides. Al Fain proposed the electrical circuit diagram for a star. It is in the form of a simple Faraday motor, which explains why the sun's equatorial plasma is driven fastest. It also explains the presence of the circumstellar disk, formed and held there by electromagnetic forces and not by weak gravity. And the problem of transfer of rotational energy does not arise because the entire system is held by powerful electromagnetic forces and driven like an electric motor. The same explanation, of course, applies on a much grander scale to the anomalous rotation of the disk of spiral galaxies. When the star-forming Z-pinch subsides, gravity is not able to retain the disk for long, and current flowing in the disk, the stellar wind, sweeps the space clear. Planets do not form from a disk of dust and gas about a star. Gravitational systems are the ashes of prior electrical systems. Hans Elfane. Due to Markland convection, stars have cores of heavy elements. Electric stars are not nuclear furnaces. They shine because they remain embedded in the galactic power grid. The decay of the Z-pinch exposes the newborn star to a new electrical environment. The critical factor in the star's stability is the current density at its photosphere. If it is excessive, the star may electrically fission into two or more pieces in order to expose a greater surface area and reduce the current density to a manageable level. Ejection of stellar matter produces a companion star, or gas giant. That may explain the baffling number of multiple star systems and close-orbiting gas giant planets. Distantly orbiting gas giants, like those in our solar system, are another story. Dwarf stars are born in the same process, probably in larger numbers than the bright stars. They do not require to fission because their electrical stress is low, as evidenced by their light. They may form fewer multiple star systems by a different process, electrical capture, to be explained later. We have dealt with star birth, but not the birth of planets like Earth. The electric universe model of solar system formation goes much further than the plasma cosmology model. Instead of imaging some initial state of the solar system and projecting a model forward in time, it is necessary to first look at the astronomical records as far back in time as possible to check the basic assumption that the sky has not changed in that time. This may seem a waste of time given the usual mantra that the Earth is 4.5 billion years old, but all ancient cultures recall an age of splendid but terrifying celestial gods and wonders that departed the skies long ago. Recent research published by the Authority on many unique forms of high-energy plasma discharge instabilities has found that the prehistoric astronomers chiseled the most ancient astronomical records into solid rock around the globe. Using global positioning and logging the magnetic orientation of those petroglyphs has resulted in the mammoth 3D dataset, which is expected to allow us to reconstruct the position and evolution of what might be termed prehistoric mega-auroras. It extends our understanding of real Earth history by about 10,000 years. A significant finding is that the petroglyphs point toward the ancient celestial plasma display, having focus at the south magnetic pole. That is what we expect of cosmic Birkeland currents, which align with the magnetic field. The implications of this discovery are dramatic and unprecedented. It shows that the Earth and the solar system have recent history of instability accompanied by planetary electrical discharge. Activity on a scale unimaginable today. The story requires many books to tell, but the principal message is the solar system is a composite family. Planets have been acquired at intervals, long after the sun was born, so looking for isotopic signatures in the solar system is something like DNA testing. Family ties may be established, but they will have nothing to do with the sun. In a later news item, I will discuss further the simple electrical feedback mechanism that swiftly restores stability in a disturbed many-body electric gravitational system. For those who can't wait, The subject is dealt with in my paper to the SIS Cambridge conference last year. For now, I will simply outline the likely origin of the planets and moons in the solar system in the next episode. But maybe more than one way, you know. But
Critical pocket. Looks like we have a no-shoot, sir. Vector 200. Put it on your nose. 8 miles. Look for an impact.
DC, negative growth, negative shoot.
Copy. We see the visual.
do you remember this? Have you seen this before on the news back in 2004? I remember seeing it and thinking, oh, that's too bad they lost a probe. And you know what that mission was for that probe? It was the Genesis satellite, the Genesis probe. The purpose of the Genesis mission was to observe the solar wind, entrap its particles, and return them to Earth in a search for the origin of Earth. The Genesis capsule, shortly after its landing, the Genesis spacecraft returned to Earth on September 8th, experiencing a non-nominal re-entry. The drogue and main parachutes failed to deploy, causing the capsule to impact the surface of the desert at a speed of 193 miles per hour. The impact caused severe damage to the capsule and a breach of the science canister in the field. And it was measuring the type of oxygen isotopes that were coming from the solar wind. In other words, the type of oxygen that was in the sun. And there was an unfortunate accident with the craft. The parachutes didn't deploy, which is odd for a NASA probe because they usually don't fail. But they found out that the isotopes from the sun were different than the oxygen isotopes in the oceans. I think Walt could tell you better. I got a little article here from him. Go over here to hollowscience.com and see what Mr. Thornhill says. Assembling the solar system. October 23rd, 2008, the Walt Thornhill EU Views. The Genesis team can take great satisfaction, not just having salvaged their mission, but in underscoring once again how little we know about how our strange and wonderful home planet came to exist. Kelly Beatty, Sky and Telescope. Kelly, I'd say be careful what you ask for. You just might get it. The purpose of the Genesis mission was to observe the solar wind, entrap its particles, and return them to Earth in a search for the origin of the Earth. It says here, credit NASA, JPL, Caltech. The Genesis capsule, shortly after its hard landing, the Genesis spacecraft returned to Earth September 8, 2004, expecting a non-nominal re-entry in which both the drogue and main parachutes failed to deploy, causing the capsule to impact the surface of the desert at a speed of 193 miles per hour. The impact caused severe damage to the capsule and a breach of the science canister of the field. Kevin McKeegan's announcement at the 2008 Lunar and Planetary Science Conference that the pattern of oxygen isotopes on the Sun differs greatly from that of the Earth took many planetary scientists by surprise. Gee, we never heard that before. The findings may help them explain how Earth and other planets grew out of the solar nebula, the giant cloud of gas and dust from which the solar system formed. McKeegan heads the UCLA team that is analyzing samples of the solar wind as part of the Genesis mission. I learned that experienced scientists were taking bets on the outcome of McKeegan's measurements, said cosmochemist Robert Clayton. Since many were reluctant to believe that the Earth and Sun could have different isotopic composition. Given the vast empty distances between stars, it seems sensible to assume that the Sun and its family of planets were born together. Scientists take for granted that gravity is the only force operating in the universe to cause matter to coalesce to form stars and planets. Astronomers observe dusty disks around some nearby stars and assume that those disks are the leftovers of matter that form the star. Observations appear to confirm the accepted story of the planets forming from collisions and accretion of matter in the protosolar disk. However, all is not as it seems. There are objections to the nebular disk accretion model that should be considered fatal were it not for the fact that no alternative seems possible, given the gravity-driven view of the universe. For example, a slowly rotating cloud may tend to collapse under gravity, but a point is quickly reached where the outward rotational force counteracts further collapse. Rotational energy must be dissipated somehow to enable the cloud to collapse more. Assuming that you manage to form a sun inside the disk, another serious difficulty arises. Gravitational interactions with the disk cause protoplanets to swiftly spiral into the star. Then there's the problem that the sun, as the most collapsed object, should be spinning the fastest, like a pirouette dancer pulling in her arms. But the sun spins slowly. Almost the entire angular momentum of the solar system is to be found in orbiting planets, and the sun's equator is tilted 7 degrees to the plane of the orbiting planets. Instead of the expected graduation of properties of the planets with distance from the sun, we find a fruit salad of characteristics which don't make any sense in the simpler nebula model. For example, the Earth has an abundance of water, but the region where early Earth formed was too hot for water to be incorporated into a solid body. So, in ad hoc fashion, meteorites had to deliver it later. As one expert on the subject remarked, you need to make a special case for each planet. Gravitational accretion of planets from a dusty disk doesn't work anymore. Once a disk, always a disk. Rings. Theory shows it is hard for a planetesimal to get 1 kilometer in size, but then, to avoid fragmentation by collision, the body needs to be 1,000 kilometers for the gravity to retain collision debris. Special requirements abound in the accretion disk model, even if we assume, despite the objections above, that planets the size of Jupiter can form. We then need a violent phase of activity from the new sun at just the right time to dissipate most of the matter of the disk, while leaving the gas giants with thick atmospheres. But then, how do we explain Jupiter's 3 times the solar abundance of noble gases? Perhaps the most significant problem of the gravity-only model is how to explain the circularity and long-term stability of planetary orbits. After all, more than 2 bodies moving under the influence of gravity produce a chaotic system. There is no restoring force when a planet is perturbed in its orbit under Newtonian law. The solar system cannot be the same that it was, even in the recent past. When we look at the nearest 100 bright stars in the solar neighborhood within 25 parsec radius, there are 40 binary stars, 15 triple stars, 5 quadruple stars. How can the accretion model explain so many multiple star systems? And where do the numerous brown dwarf stars fit? They have a much lower binary star fraction of 15%. And why do stars seem to have a maximum mass of 100 solar masses? As another expert put it, the theory of star formation fails. Mysteries abound. The Genesis mission provides at least one more mystery. Oxygen is the 3rd most abundant element in the cosmos, of which the isotope oxygen-16 makes up 99.67%, oxygen-17, 0.04%, and oxygen-18, 0.02%. Kelly Beatty writes, the sun represented a critical missing piece in its isotopic puzzle. Cosmochemists assume that whatever atoms populate the solar wind must be representative of what's in the sun itself, and therefore a sample of the raw mix from which the planets form. So would the sun's oxygen ratios match those of the Earth or of ancient meteorites? The very framework of planetary formation hung in the balance. At the 39th Annual Lunar Planetary Science Conference in Houston, Texas, Kevin McKeegan, UCLA, announced that the sun has proportionately far more oxygen-16 relative to oxygen-17 and 18 than is present in terrestrial seawater. There's a serious mismatch. Instead, the solar ratios follow the same trend seen in primitive meteorites. Suddenly, Earth is the odd planet out. We had little idea what the sun's ratios should be, McKeegan told me after his presentation. Now, he says, there's no plausible model to make Earth with the oxygen ratios it exhibits. It's always been a challenge to supply Earth with the water it has. And now we're wondering how it got the rocks it has. The view was echoed by Robert Creighton, a University of Chicago cosmochemist. The CAIs were thought to be formation of stars and planets is a failure. So why are self-congratulatory statements like the following delivered at an astronomical conference in 2005 being made? Two of the great scientific success stories of the last several decades are our growing understanding of the way stars form and our ability to reconstruct the history of our own solar system. These two lines of scientific investigation meet in the sun's protoplanetary disk. It seems scientists should be alerted to the human propensity for conformity bias. So basically, since 2005, mainstream science has known that the Earth's oxygen is not the same as the oxygen of the sun. A major in science. This refers to the tendency for humans to seek out, attend to, and sometimes embellish experiences that support or confirm their beliefs. Confirmatory experiences are selectively welcomed and granted easy credibility. Disconformity experiences, on the other hand, are often ignored, discredited, or treated with obvious defensiveness. The most costly expression of this tendency may well be among scientists themselves. The costs of this cognitive bias are perhaps nowhere as serious as in the area of scientific publication. Michael J. Mahoney, Cognitive Therapy and Research, 1977. Despite scientists' beliefs, there is an alternative to the gravity-only assumption of consensus cosmology. Unfortunately, the North Polar region remains ice-free, as we learned in Worlds in Collision. Siberia was also ice-free due to the concentration of radiated energy arriving from Saturn sitting above the North Pole. The Earth's vegetation takes on a reddish hue, at this time giving Earth its purple-hued look for anyone seeing it from orbit. Common misnomer surrounding the Earth's ice ages is that
That's it. You wanted to hear it. You got it. I haven't heard that in a long, long time. I just pulled it out of the bin today. I said, Halloween. Pygmy Bush Bear. I remember it was 1999. That was 22 years ago. Man, time flies, doesn't it? Well, I've got to be off the air by 7:30. I got a game today at noon, so. And got another band, then another band, and how it is.
Your drummer, that was a.
How come it's not happening?
So what, you gonna pitch a few balls today?
Yeah, I'm gonna work out with the team. I don't know if I'm gonna play in the game, but I've been getting ready because I hurt my knee and I didn't think I was gonna be able to come back, but I think I can. I've been practicing in the backyard a lot. I really miss it.
Oh.
Better be careful.
Careful of what?
Yeah, but it's a good.
They only have your.
It's good.
Yeah, I mean, shoot, man. You know.
It is a good social outing, though. But you can't stay home all your life.
Ah, you know, it's an old dudes league. It's not like. How come it's still showing the video that it hasn't changed over yet? What's going on with this thing? Nah, there they are. Okay. And I'm sorry I played the music, but I just had to. I'm gonna after I cut it out, you know, after it gets edited. But yeah, sometimes I just like listening to it. I kind of overdid because Mark, man, he's just a power drummer. He's like John Bonham, you know. He's just got that big heavy hit, you know. But we played with another drummer that didn't hit him as hard, and we had just as much fun. You know? It just depends. I'll have to play that for you next time.
Somebody has a question.
Yeah, sure. Velikovsky, Worlds in Collision, Chapter 3, Venus. And it's quite a lengthy chapter. I've got most of the audio done.
Yeah,
I don't know whether that would be. If it's in that, you know, book, then eventually, yeah, I will be. But I don't know when.
Not today, though. Yeah.
No, not today.
Yeah.
I got to get off soon. Oh, I see where you're at. Yeah, will you be reading some Manuel Velikovsky or an appropriate excerpt from the Torah? That's interesting. Well, you know, I can't do that now, but I will do it.
An appropriate excerpt from the Torah.
Yeah, appropriate for
the Torah has stuff about electric universe in it?
Basically,
or
no.
Or Worlds of Collision?
Velikovsky refers to all the religious texts, not just the Bible.
Right.
The Bible was the Torah.
Right.
And the Torah came from tarot. It's not the other way around. Actually, astrology was the first religion.
Okay.
And the Torah came from the tarot, believe it or not. That's the name. And, you know, Christianity is a lot newer than astrology. They used to call it astrotheologia. They got a couple of videos on YouTube, too. But anyways, I was going to play... Did you want me to play the rest of this video that I was playing? Or do you want me to move on a little bit? I got about another hour. So.
It's up to you, whatever you want to do. Yeah.
Well, I don't want you guys... Is Adusa around, or did he leave?
Yeah, he's still around.
Yeah, because I don't mind talking either, you know. Talking's cool, too. You guys want to chat, you know? Hey, Stella.
I mean, inspection, Gnostics, techniques required. Saturn, that they take it to another level.
You'd like to kick back and listen to. All right, I'll throw on my Purple Dawn video. We'll watch a little bit of that. And then I got to find it first. So hold on. I'm going to put you back on the... I got to put you guys back on the slideshow briefly. And then I'll dig up the video on the next page. Over here, the next tab. There it is. And we'll get into... Please tell me my mic's on. Okay.
Yeah, your mic's on.
Yeah. Oh, I got one. Ancient Planet Gods, F. Cochrane. How's that sound? It's got
okay, that sounds good.
All right.
I always liked him.
Oh, yeah. Me too. All right. I think this is it. Should come in with that music. Hey, it's on. Wait a minute. Why are you turned off, baby? Let's go back.
you ever wondered why the ancients named their gods after the planets, or the planets got named after the ancient gods? Times. How is it that these things can be little specks in the night sky, but the ancients knew so much about them? Myths sound wild on the very surface of it, and if you listen to one myth, none of it makes sense. But people that can make art like that cave in France, or build something as perfectly orientated to the north like the Great Pyramid, why would their stories be filled with nonsense? Everything about their myth makes sense when you put them all together, which inspired Immanuel Velikovsky and later David Talbot to do. And he has this fascinating theory called Saturn theory, and we explore it. For me, the more I learn, the more I keep coming back. And that's what we're getting into right now. We're exploring Saturn theory for our origin. A lot of it makes a lot of sense, and the thing that I like about it the most, it's as interesting as any subject, to put it mildly. So that's where we're headed. This time we're doing the Ev Cochrane's version. We pick up something new every time. The Saturn Theory by E.V. Cochrane. The Saturn Theory, in addition to presenting a comprehensive model of ancient myth, offers a radically different approach to understanding the recent history of the solar system. Briefly, the theory posits that the neighboring planets only recently settled into their current orbits, the Earth formerly being involved in a unique planetary configuration of sorts, together with Saturn, Venus, and Mars. As the terrestrial skywatcher looked upwards, he saw a spectacular and awe-inspiring apparition dominating the celestial landscape. At the heart of heaven, the massive gas giant Saturn appeared fixed atop the north polar axis, with Venus and Mars set within its center like two concentric orbs. See Figure 1. Where Venus is the green orb and Mars the innermost red orb. Kind of looks like one of those olives. I wonder if that's why they made it look like that. The olive, that is. It looks just like one, doesn't it? The theory holds that the origin of ancient myth and religion, indeed the origin of the primary institutions of civilization itself, is inextricably linked to the numinous appearance and evolutionary history of this unique congregation of planets. How does one go about documenting this extraordinary claim? Extraordinary claims, it is commonly said, require extraordinary evidential support in order to be believed. While I believe the Saturn theory can and eventually will meet this crucial test, it goes without saying that a discussion of the various lines of evidence pointing to the polar configuration would require several volumes in order to make a compelling case. In this brief overview, alas, I can do no more than offer a small sampling of the relevant evidence. If the truth be known, the Saturn theory suffers from an embarrassment of riches with respect to evidence which supports the central tenets of the theory. Early descriptions of the Sun and various planets from Mesopotamia and elsewhere describe them as occupying impossible positions and moving in a manner which defies astronomical reality, as currently understood, that is. The ancient sun god, for example, is said to rise and set upon the same sacred mountain. The planet Venus is described as standing at the heart of heaven, or within the crescent of sin, with respect to evidence which supports the central tenets of the theory. Mars is pointed to as a principal agent behind eclipses of the ancient sun god. While not one of these scenarios is possible given the current order of the solar system, each is perfectly consistent with the history of respective planets in the polar configuration as reconstructed by Saturnists. The testimony from ancient myth and folklore is equally unequivocal that the respective planets once moved on radically different orbits and rained catastrophe from the skies. Even if the message has been overlooked and ostracized by everyone except Velikovsky. Thus, numerous cultures tell of a time when different suns ruled the heavens. This belief was especially common in the New World. The idea that the sun was not eternal was shared by other American Indian tribes so widely that we consider it must have been part of their belief long before any culture had arisen in the Americas. The Popol Vuh, lauded as the Mayan Bible, attests to the same idea. Their previous sun is described as follows. Like a man was the sun when it showed itself. It showed itself when it was born and remained fixed in the sky like a mirror. Certainly it was not the same sun which we see. it is said in their old tales. Equally widespread are traditions which report that a great monster once eclipsed the sun and brought the world to the brink of destruction. Countless cultures preserve memory of the terrifying time when Venus assumed a comet-like form. Spectacular conjunction of planets dominated the celestial landscape. Such traditions can be documented from one culture to another, and upon systematic analysis, reveal numerous analogous structural details, a telltale sign that they were inspired by common experience of spectacular celestial events rather than creative imagination and fantasy. In addition to the remarkably detailed and consistent testimony from ancient myth and folklore, the artistic record likewise provides compelling evidence that the planets only recently moved on radically different orbits. Consider, for example, 3 images depicted in Figure 2 here. As I have documented, such images are ubiquitous in the prehistoric rock art of every inhabited continent. Hitherto, they have been interpreted as drawings of the sun by virtually all leading authorities on ancient art and religion. This despite the fact that they do not have any obvious resemblance to the current solar orb. It is noteworthy that the ancient sun god was depicted in the very same manner by the earliest civilizations in Egypt and Mesopotamia. Figure 3, for example, shows an Akkadian seal in which the Shamash disk is represented as an eye-like object, as in the first image in Figure 2. Figure 4 shows the Shamash disk as an 8-pointed star or wheel. Figure 5 shows the Shamash disk as an 8-petaled flower. Numerous other variations upon these common themes could be provided, all impossible to reconcile with the appearance of the solar orb. That's Figure 4 and 5. It is at this point that the researcher is presented with a theoretical dilemma, the successful resolution of which promises to unlock the secret of our planet's extraordinary recent prehistory. If one elects to dismiss the specific and consistent imagery associated with these ancient solar images as a product of creative imagination, the typical approach of conventional art historians, one is also forced to dismiss the equally widespread testimony that different suns prevailed in ancient times. This approach has little to recommend it, for it involves nothing less than turning a deaf ear to the testimony of our ancestors, and in any case, which thus far has produced precious few insights into the origin of ancient symbolism and myth. Yet, the alternative is equally unthinkable, for it involves accepting these endlessly reoccurring images as accurate drawings of the ancient sun, albeit one different in nature and appearance than the currently prevailing. As bizarre as this possibility appears, at first glance, it does have much to recommend it. The ancient Babylonians were careful to distinguish Shamash from the current sun. It was this little-known datum which led Velikovsky to consider the possibility that Saturn formerly appeared more prominent, perhaps even serving as a sun-like body for the satellite Earth. Velikovsky's seminal insight, in turn, served as the theoretical foundation for the subsequent researches of Talbot, Cardona, Rose, Tressman, Neugrosch, and others, who offered further evidence for the basic claim that Saturn once dominated the heavens, a fact reflected in the otherwise puzzling prominence accorded this planet in the earliest pantheons. The Saturn theory receives additional support from the representation of the planet Venus in ancient art. A straightforward interpretation of the various images superimposed upon the solar disk in Figure 2 would understand the first as an eye, the second as an 8-spoked wheel or star, and the third as an 8-petaled flower. Now, it is a remarkable fact that the planet Venus is consistently associated with these very forms, from one ancient culture to another. The ancient Sumerians, for example, represented Venus as Inanna, as an eye goddess, 8-pointed star, and 8-petaled flower or rosette. Consider the figurine represented in Figure 6 here, thousands of which were discovered by Max Mallowan during his excavations of the Inanna precinct at Uruk. Similar eye goddesses have been found throughout the ancient world, from Neolithic Europe to India. Figure 7 shows an early cylinder seal from the Jemdet Nasser period, circa 3000 BC, depicting Inanna as an eye goddess, alongside her familiar 8-petaled rosette there. Figure 7. The sacred iconography surrounding the Akkadian Ishtar reveals the same basic images. Thus, Figure 8 shows Ishtar, Venus, together with an 8-spoked wheel, while Figure 9 shows Ishtar, Venus, together with an 8-pointed star. Figure 10 shows Ishtar in conjunction with a rosette-like star. The fact that the planet Venus is associated with the very same forms in Mesoamerica, where the observation and worship of our sister planet formed an obsession, strongly supports the conclusion that such images have their own origin in ancient appearance of the planet. The same conclusion is supported by the fact that cultures as distant and disparate as those of the Australian Aborigines, Maya, Polynesians, and Chinese describe Venus by epithets signifying great eye, great star, and luminous flower. How are we to explain this curious state of affairs, whereby Venus is associated with the various symbols seemingly depicted in prehistoric sun images? Surely not by reference to the current solar system, for Venus does not even vaguely resemble an eye, 8-pointed star, or flower. Yet if Venus only recently appeared superimposed against the backdrop of Saturn, Shamash, as per the reconstruction offered by Talbot and myself, depicted in Figure 1, its role as an eye is explained at once. Upon further evolution of the polar configuration, Venus assumed a radiant appearance, sending forth streamers across the face of the ancient sun god. See Figure 11. This situation is reflected in the latter two images in Figure 3 and accounts for Venus' role as a star or luminous flower. Planets in ancient lore. At the turn of the century, it was widely held that the most sacred traditions of the creation, deluge, golden age, dragon combat, etc., were nature myths describing the stereotypical behavior of the two primary celestial bodies. Typically, in allegorical or humoristic fashion, the Saturn theory offers a similar conclusion with the all-important proviso that the planets formerly dominated the celestial and intellectual horizons rather than the current sun and moon. That the earliest gods and mythical figures of the various cultures are celestial in nature is easily shown. The Sumerian goddess Inanna, explicitly identified with the planet Venus already at the dawn of the historical period, circa 3300 BCE, is a case in point and might well serve as an exemplar for comparative analysis. Virtually every ancient culture will feature a goddess with notable structural affinities to Inanna, although the identification with Venus is not always preserved. The Pawnee Indians of the American Central Plains, for example, celebrate the wondrous deeds of the primeval goddess Cupitica, identified with Venus. It was her union with the warrior god Pararaku, explicitly identified with the planet Mars, which signaled the crowning event of creation. The second god, Tirawahat, placed in the heavens, was evening star, known to the white people as Venus. She was a beautiful woman by speaking and waving her hands. She could perform wonders through this star and morning star, Mars. All things were created. She is the mother of the Skiri. As the Pawnee traditions attest, the planet Mars played a prominent role in ancient myth and religion. Wherever one looks, one will find the red planet accorded a numinous power wildly out of proportion to its present modest appearance. The Sumerian war god Nergal, early on identified with the planet Mars, forms a pivotal figure in comparative analysis. Thus, it can be shown that war gods and warrior heroes from every corner of the globe share numerous characteristics in common with the Sumerian god, including some of a remarkable specific nature. To take but one mythical theme of hundreds available, the Makuritari Indians of the Amazonian rainforest tell of a time when the hero, Hizahama, identified with the red planet, climbed a giant stairway to the sky. The fact that a very similar story was related of Nergal in ancient Mesopotamia suggests that the mythical theme originated in objective historical events involving the red planet. Yet, one looks in vain for a satisfactory explanation of this particular mythical theme, given the current order of the solar system, wherein a celestial stairway is not to be found. Neolithic rock art, however, offers countless examples of stairway-like appendages descending from the ancient sun god, thereby complementing and helping to illuminate the universal myth of a luminous stairway spanning the heavens. See Figure 12. The possibility, thus, presents itself that the stairway to heaven was a visible apparition associated with the ancient sun god during a particular phase of the polar configuration towards a science of mythology. With the goal of developing a rigorous scientific methodology for the study of ancient myth, the Saturnists would offer a series of basic ground rules deemed to be essential if researchers are to discover the true significance and message of ancient mythical traditions. First and foremost, perhaps, is the general proposition that ancient myth constitutes an invaluable and generally trustworthy source for reconstructing a valid history of our solar system. Far from being a leap of faith, this fundamental finding of the Saturn theory derives from several decades of extensive research into ancient myth and can be demonstrated using normal methods of logic and evidence. A second basic tenet would emphasize the comparative method. Simply stated, no ancient myth or primary cultural institution is fully understandable in isolation. Egyptian myth, to take but one example, is incomprehensible apart from detailed analysis of analogous themes and motifs. From ancient Mesopotamia to the New World, both of which provide the indispensable link to early astronomical traditions, all but lost in Egypt itself. Horus's identification with the morning star and Mars offers a notable exception in this regard and forms a close analog to the Pawnee traditions surrounding the red planet. Hathor's identification with the Eye of Ra, for example, can only be understood by reference to the widespread idea whereby Venus once formed the central eye of the ancient sun god. Note further that Hathor's name, which signifies House of Horus, captures perfectly the essence of the relationship between Venus and Mars, as illustrated in Figure 1. The planet goddess Hathor Venus, as the Eye of Ra, literally housed the warrior Horus Mars. It is little wonder, then, given the reconstruction offered here, that the Egyptian pyramid and coffin texts implore the dead king, as Horus, to ascend the numinous celestial ladder in order to join Ra and reign in the mansion of Hathor in the sky. I am Horus. Give me the ladder which you gave to my father, so that I may ascend on it to the sky and escort Ra. A third basic tenet of the Saturn theory holds that ancient myth and ritual typically commemorate dramatic events witnessed by human beings. If myth constitutes a creative interpretation of the traumatic celestial events, in pseudo-historical terms, the flooding of the world, the warrior heroes consorting with a beautiful goddess, ritual originated as a purposeful and remarkably fateful attempt to reenact the fateful events in question. Mars, climbing out of the celestial stairway, for example, was reenacted in countless sacred rites throughout the ancient world. The archetypal rite of the sacred marriage, attested already at the dawn of history in Mesopotamia, purports to commemorate the king's union with the planet Venus, Inanna. The original inspiration for this bizarre rite, as I have theorized, was the spectacular conjunction of Venus and Mars in prehistoric times. A fourth basic tenet of the Saturn theory holds that historical evidence, together with consistent or widespread human testimony, must be given credence, even if a ready explanation of such testimony is not immediately obvious or appears to contradict current scientific opinion. Velikovsky's admonition in the preface to Worlds in Collision serves as a rallying cry here. If occasionally historical evidence does not square with the formulated laws, it should be remembered that a law is but a deduction from experience in the experiment. Therefore, laws must conform with historical facts, not facts with laws. The famous controversy over the likelihood that rocks, meteors, could fall from the sky, a possibility denied by several of the best minds of the 18th and 19th centuries, might well serve as a prototype here. Formerly dismissed as too ridiculous to merit serious discussion, the fact that meteorites occasionally fall to Earth from heaven was well known to the ancient Sumerians. All but lost for several millennia, such knowledge is once again commonplace amongst schoolboys everywhere. Equally lesson-laden is the ongoing controversy over the possibility that rocks from Mars could somehow find their way to Earth, fervently denied by various leading authorities until quite recently, circa 1987. The eventual triumph of the Martian meteorite hypothesis is yet another classic example of the leading paradigms of the scientific age being instantly overturned by a series of anomalous findings. Such examples could be multiplied ad infinitum. Science, much like religion, proves to be notoriously malleable in this regard. What is considered impossible or futuristic by one generation might well come to be accepted by future generations unencumbered by similar prejudices. A fifth basic tenet of the Saturn theory holds that recurring anomalies in ancient myth and tradition offer a key to discover. Certainly, it is most unlikely that one culture would invent traditions of fire-breathing dragons or witches that once threatened to eclipse the ancient sun god. Yet, when one finds the very same improbable motif from one ancient culture to another, logic suggests that something other than fantasy and coincidence is at work here, unencumbered by similar prejudices. A sixth central tenet of the Saturn theory holds that the history and evolution of the polar configuration constitutes nothing less than the history of the gods. The birth of the warrior hero, the warlike rampage of the mother goddess, the death or eclipse of the primeval sun god, and 1,000 different themes alike, all have their inspiration in the spectacular events associated with the evolution of the polar configuration. A seventh basic tenet of the Saturn theory holds that future discoveries vis-a-vis the geology and geomorphology of the respective planets will act to either confirm or deny the model. For it stands to reason that, if the extraordinary history described here has any basis in reality, such events must have left an indelible mark on the planets that participated in the polar configuration. It is also expected that some of these telltale signs of participation in the polar configuration will prove to be difficult, if not impossible, to explain by any other model. A fundamental objection to the Saturn theory. The most obvious objection to the Saturn theory is its apparent incompatibility with conventional astrophysics. This is indeed a formidable objection, one deserving of serious attention and ultimately a valid answer, ideally in terms of offering a viable physical model for the polar configuration. While promising steps towards achieving a viable physical model have been achieved, the models of Grubal and Driscoll, for example, such attempts have thus far proved preliminary and only partly successful. Much work remains to be done in this area, preferably by scientists trained in the requisite fields of astronomy, physics, and mechanics. Personally, I remain confident that an answer will be found, if for no other reason than it is highly improbable that a theory with so much historical evidence in its favor could prove entirely illusory. If the history of science teaches us anything, it is there is ample precedent for reserving judgment on a historical thesis well supported by evidence, but lacking a viable physical model. Darwin's theory of evolution, to take a particularly notorious example, languished for decades under the objection that it lacked a viable model of heredity which could explain how the much-needed genetic changes could originate and come to be fixed rather than blended as per earlier models of heredity. Already by the time of Darwin, there was a wealth of evidence that evolution had occurred. How else are we to explain the fact that modern whales occasionally show traces of vestigial hind limbs and hip girdles, but a viable model of heredity was not yet at hand, to say nothing of a chemical model for genetic mutation or embryonic differentiation. In formidable mysteries, no informed scientist can doubt the historical reality that biological evolution has occurred. The question is, how did life evolve, and by what precise means? A similar situation surrounds the Saturn theory, in my opinion. Here, too, the historical evidence is unequivocal that various planets once participated in a polar configuration and wreaked havoc with the inner solar system. The question is, how are we to understand these tumultuous historical events from the standpoint of physics? F. Cochrane. It's a good read. The one biggest hurdle for me is how could the ancients worship these bloodthirsty killers they called gods? These bloodthirsty killers they killers they called gods, when it would be a speck in the sky that takes 29 years to orbit the sun. As they say, that dog don't hunt. That is the biggest conundrum of all, and also all the worldwide iconography, and it's all still with us today. It's amazing how much Saturn is in our culture. All right, that'll do it for me. Thank you for all of you that have donated, and please like, share, and comment on this video so more people can see it. Take care. I'll see you on down the road.
Thus, as you see, we read with different eyes, with different mind. The first part of Rosen collision about signifies for us. We are in a state of a victim of amnesia. Humankind is a victim of amnesia. And a victim of amnesia does not act responsibly. He acts irrationally.
There's a house in New Orleans they call the rising sun, and it's been a run of many poor boys. Well, that's going to do it for me for another Saturday. Are you guys around? Is the gang still here?
Yes, still about.
Ah, there you are.
I know Paul is. See her on the chat.
Yeah, I just want to come out here and say hello to and good night to everybody. St. Pauli girl, of course. Love the belly dancers. Me too. Doing God's work, Greg. Saturn Matrix. I love it. Good name. Thank you. Donald Wages. How you doing, buddy? Good to see you here. Nick, of course. Ancient History Criticisms. Love him. And who else do we got? Anybody else? Saturn Matrix. Philip Julian. Good to see you. Michael Stiller. Always good to see you. Oh, that's good to see her. Brandy, there she is. Brandy, where you been? I notice I have a list, and I'm checking it twice. Yeah, it's good to see everybody, really. We had a real good night tonight. I had fun. Hi, Donald. Ancient. And I hate to quit, but I have to. I got to get a little rest. I got a physical activity later. I'm going to go work out with the baseball team. So I got to have my wits. So,
Great day, Greg.
hey, Adusa. What's up, buddy? You guys join me next time. The next time we're going to be coming out with the Chapter 3 from Velikovsky. I have to show it to my super supporters first, and I will get it to everyone. And, man, it's always a pleasure working with you guys. I really, it's like we're a team, you know? I like that.
I love every Sunday, Greg. I love my Sunday mornings.
Oh, okay. Well, you like doing it on Sunday, or you want Sunday? You don't mind?
No, I love the show on a Sunday morning. Me, that's